Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Guilty, where we look at games, movies, or whatever else strikes our fancy, then decide in our opinions whether it's good, bad, or guilty pleasure. We're your hosts, Theron.
And Kit.
Today, we were wanting to talk about a movie that has a bad stigma on it, and that movie is...
Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within.
You sound so enthused.
Fine. Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. Made in 2001, directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, who is the creator of the Final Fantasy series. It was the first photorealistic computer-animated feature film, and remains the most expensive video game-inspired film of all time.
The Spirits Within debuted to mixed critical reception, but was widely praised for the realism of the computer-animated characters. Due to the rising cost, the film greatly exceeded its original budget towards the end of production, reaching a final cost of $137 million, of which it recovered only $85 million at the box office. The film has been called a box office bomb and is blamed for the demise of Square Pictures. It was the first animated feature for Columbia since Care Bears Movie 2: A New Generation.
Square intended to make the character of Aki Ross into the world's first photorealistic computer-animated actress, with plans for appearances in multiple films in different roles. In all seriousness, it seems like the movie gets a lot of hate already. It seems like a really bad thing to review. It's just going to be the usual review ending with a bad grade. It has nothing to do with the Final Fantasy series.
Then let's mix it up. Instead of simply reviewing it, I've got knowledge about the tropes that Final Fantasy follows. I bet you I can find them inside this movie.
This movie starts off, of course, with a scene that makes no sense. She's on a deserted planet and, walking on water?
As with a lot, if not most, Final Fantasy games, the start doesn't make much sense until later on. For example, in Final Fantasy X, we weren't privy to how Blitzball worked. We didn't know who Sin was. It is explained later, and this mindfuck is explained later as well.
If we move a bit further, not very far though, it turns out this was a dream sequence. The narration goes ahead and explains what's going on in the scene and leads to the shocking reveal. The planet this Final Fantasy story is taking place on...
Vowed to end that fear. I believe my dreams hold the key. The question is, will I be in time to save the Earth?
This, I'd say, is possibly the absolute biggest fault of the movie. Most Final Fantasy games take place on some weird, somewhat exotically named world. It's detached from the reality we all know and fully lets us feel like we're in a world of mysticism and fantasy.
In this one, we get Earth. How impressive, really reaching for the stars with that one. I mean, it's like having a space epic where the end goal is just to travel to Earth. Alright. Moving onward, we see she's decided to do a stupid task of going alone into what is described to be a dangerous area. And it seems she's got herself into a bit of a bind. Good thing the Hero Squad is right on cue with their instant jello cubes.
I'm sure those were less expensive than using rope. I mean, they totally wouldn't do that just to look cool or because plummeting towards the Earth is fun.
Thanks to the great and helpful timing of the Hero Squad, our protagonist gets to live another day. And they're kind enough to help her do her job while they're at it.
We're surrounded. No shit!
Something I do kind of feel was well done is the banter in this. It's not always spot on, but the characters are given personality with very few words for the most part, and when the unit talks to one another, you can see they do have some unity within the group. They aren't simply mindless fodder.
They complete their job and escape under what is possibly some of the most overblown music I've ever heard for such a simple scene.
Yeah, the music here was a bad idea.
On board the ship, we get to meet the crew without their masks, and our protagonist gets her lecture for being so stupid and almost dying, even though the Hero Squad was there right on cue as though they knew she'd be there. And of course, it's then revealed that the protagonist and the Hero Squad leader once had a thing.
Aha! Another trope.
What?
Yes, a common occurrence in the Final Fantasy games is to have what I labeled as the perfect couple. Two people, the selfless hero, whom needs to spend their time helping others even at the expense of themselves, and their counterpart, the defender. Their job is to, for the most part, defend the hero above all else, including breaking logic and scenario rules to make it happen.
Honestly, this seems more like an Alien movie more than it is a Final Fantasy movie. The enemies are ghosts that can be hurt by bullets. Why is that a thing?
They're using magic guns.
Are you seeing that as an excuse?
Look, 20 years ago, who discovered this energy in the Phantoms? You. And who proved the same energy source existed in humans and every life form? You. You made it possible to harness that energy for Ovopack, scanners, even the barrier.
Oh hey, magic inside the tech.
See? Magic guns. Also the scientist whose name's Sid.
After their little conversation explaining the ghost in the machine, we end up being treated to another dream sequence. How lovely. In this one, there's now creatures charging for war. And then fancy ships for no reason?
The jarring dream sequences happen a bit too much. There's going to be a few more as the movie goes along, and what they're doing is showing what happened to lead up to the Phantoms on Earth in a bit of a convoluted way.
After being crushed by the spaceships who can't even fly up successfully, our protagonist Doctor wakes up in her bed and has to rush off to a council meeting. Here we meet the main non-monster villain of the movie, the big bad military man.
Another trope.
What? No, Final Fantasy doesn't make every villain be military.
No, in most Final Fantasy games, and possibly in all, they always have a faction of good and a faction of misguidedness. Not particularly evil in most cases, so much as their methods are bound to fail, and thus they are the evil one in the story, always against the heroes on their journey.
To sum up this scene, this guy is trigger-happy and misguided. This guy is smart. She's our hero, the Earth is alive, and to add to the crazy, our hero now houses phantoms in her. And yes, it is established that such a feat is possible.
I have a real problem with the premise that they made a weapon only a month prior and just assume it'll do the job.
No nitpicking. More so, while they did show people can be infected by the phantoms, the reveal is kinda handled poorly for her. They maintain that these are dangerous, but with her they are able to make the tech to isolate it. Yet not for anybody else infected.
It's Zero Syndrome, not a trope exclusive to Final Fantasy, so I don't count it.
The scene ends with a pretty predictable end. The hero gets what they want, the villain gets annoyed and sets up for any excuse he can find to further his plans instead, the usual flair for most movies. And then we move on to the romance between the, perfect couple.
They're so perfect together that even when they fight, they're making up with one another right within the fight. She gives him the silent treatment for like 2 seconds. He mentioned it, and she dispels his complaints.
Down below while this is happening, the other crew members of Team Hero are doing non-hero things, such as stranding the two for the romantic isolation cliché. It's kind of nice to actually see someone causing it instead of it just being a random occurrence for once. Once they succeed, we return back above with the two lovebirds, who once again start bickering at one another.
Just sum it up.
And how about the fact that I was sent there on a job and you wouldn't even see me?
I was probably helping Dr. Sid collect spirit waves.
Well, now I know.
So I'm sorry.
Well, me too, so we're both sorry.
They are both actually angry about apologizing to one another. That is the idea of the conflict between these two. We then get some exposition that shows us more about the hero doctor's mindset and her conviction.
The fifth was a little girl, dying in a hospital emergency room. I retrieved the sample in time, but she... I told her everything had a spirit. Dogs, cats, trees, little girls, even the earth. I told her that she wasn't dying, just returning to the earth spirit, to Gaia. She told me that she was ready to die. She said I didn't have to make up stories to make her feel better. Only 7 years old and ready to die.
While trying to get lucky over the story of a dead kid. Wow, that sounded so much worse than I thought it would. We then get them almost kissing only to have the stuff come back to life just in time to stop them.
In a world where machines are controlled by spirits, apparently they don't like people getting their Mac on connected to dead children's stories. Who knew?
We then move onward to the villain of the movie, trying to get any little shred of evidence he can. in this case by reassigning Team Hero to keep an eye on our protagonist. It even includes the dark room to make it nice and intimidating. Of course, we find the bad guy can't be trusted with trusting the good guys being trustworthy, so he sends along his own guys with Team Hero.
Don't worry, they won't impede progress. They're just phantom fodder. We have to keep this to a 2-hour runtime after all.
Wow, things went bad fast. Oh wait, dream sequence. In this one, we get to see two sides going to war with one another and then just stop fighting? We get some narration explaining that the dreams are from the Phantom in her chest. The simple explanation is that the barrier keeping her alive is weakening, so more of the Phantom's memories are bleeding out into her mind. We get a quick little bit of banter showing us the two guys sent with the crew to keep an eye on them. Unlike Team Hero, who's been promoted to less headgear, the evil guys doing their job are wearing concealing headgear.
Of course, can't have us confusing who actually dies in the coming fight.
The team release some special beacons that pull the creatures away from the location the team are looking for. We get some expositional history about the area.
This was the Phantom cleansing mission. It was supposed to end the war. Our father's in here somewhere.
Of course, we go through the whole spirit in the tech thing again. It's the spirit that Team Hero is here for happens to be located inside a battery.
Of course, the magic beacons don't do their job very well, and so the creatures are on their way back pretty quick, apparently. You'd figure they would have timers for how long this stuff would work.
No, he was just 2 days from retirement.
I kind of get making the creatures visible for the sake of knowing what's going on for the viewer, but the enemies are normally invisible. Shouldn't we at least have something to explain why they are visible now beyond viewers' convenience?
Of course not. I actually want to see what's going on. I don't need a movie of people shooting at thin air. We of course get a quick little snippet implying that the protagonist's weakening barrier is the key to why the beacons aren't working. But that's a little late now that Nameless Lackey 1 is dead.
Oh, they carry those fancy 2-charge rifles, where you charge it so you can aim it and then charge again to fire. Not the best choice of firearms, but I guess it's the action sequence that matters.
They quickly board the transport ship and rush out underneath a fairly underwhelming looking Phantom.
That we shouldn't be able to see.
I said no nitpicking. Oh hey, Nameless Lackey 1 somehow survived getting his soul sucked out and eaten. Good for him!
The argument could be made that there was a third guy who we just didn't see, but it then comes to even more questions, such as why even show us the two on the trip if there were more?
Thanks to the worrying state of our protagonists, the evil bad guys take it upon themselves to do their job against Team Hero. This obviously won't end well for them. Into another dream sequence we go. It's really nice to see that they all patiently wait for a nuclear bomb to go off out of nowhere. Our protagonist wakes up and apparently startles a trained soldier into turning at her and then shooting her. Because of course he would. This gives Team Hero enough distraction to attack Nameless Lackey 2, and for some reason Nameless Lackey 1 does nothing until after he's guaranteed to fail to stop them.
Well, obviously coming back from getting your soul ripped out kind of knocks the wind out of you. Wow, what luck of him shooting at just the right moment to make people dodge out of the way so that the tentacle would get him. Had he not done that, one of them may have died with him.
Yeah, maybe he wasn't such a horrible Nameless Lackey after all. Jump ahead, and somehow the villain of the movie has been given the info, even though it was implied that they stopped the information from being sent. Was the boyfriend from Team Hero just that committed to his job?
Kind of comes out of nowhere in this case and all.
We find out that there are complications over the gunshot and a newly collected spirit because of a very convenient bullet in a movie where all we've seen has been magic-based guns. So the boyfriend has to go into the mind of the protagonist because if he doesn't keep her spirit where it is, she'll die on the spot.
Hockey? Where are we?
On an alien planet?
How is that possible?
I'm not entirely sure.
You seem pretty calm.
I've been having this dream every night for months.
Dream?
Well, whatever it is. You're really here, aren't you?
Yes, I'm sure everyone would react in such a bland and lifeless manner to suddenly being on another world possibly galaxies away. And I mean him, not her. Moving along from that, we find somehow the military has gotten to the lab and is now looking at her dreams?
Had this been a game, there would have been a 20-minute cutscene explaining how she was able to record her dreams, but here we're just supposed to assume that that was what she was doing at the start of the movie.
They use this knowledge as means to further their goal of shooting and possibly killing Earth, in their attempts of killing the aliens. Back to the dream, we get a more visual fight scene than the one earlier, which just leads us back to the staring nuke moment, because it makes just as much sense the second time around.
Ah, but here we get to see that multiple nukes went off, and blew a chunk of their planet to Earth.
Okay, so they should be all dead.
Yeah, you know that thing that wasn't really hidden from the start of the movie because them being invisible and outright being called phantoms wasn't the biggest giveaway? Yeah, they're alien ghosts.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
Move on to another scene where the bad guy just suddenly starts explaining why he hates the Phantoms. What?
Another trope. Most every main antagonist in the Final Fantasy series, along with being against trying something new, will have a backstory that explains his hatred and why he is so dead set on this method.
Yeah, but this came out of nowhere. I almost missed it even.
Poor pacing of the movie, but it is a Final Fantasy trope.
We get a simple motivational speech meant to show us yet again he's the bad guy, even though his reasonings for it make sense, though it comes out of nowhere. And now we get to see where he really screws it all up, because doing his job and outing the others wasn't good enough. Let's go for the gold! Next up, we get a nice little lecture letting us know that none of the Phantoms are distinctly related because ghosts.
Honestly, this seems like a portion of story that could have been used elsewhere, because I didn't think they were aliens who invaded in the first place.
Back to bad guys being bad guys, we see they did a bad and have released more of them into the city than they intended because they did not know they were ghosts.
What have I done?
Aha! You can't tell me Final Fantasy villains usually realize they messed up.
Okay, no, it's rare if at all a Final Fantasy villain admits or realizes they messed up. They almost always just double down on this stupidity.
We go back to Team Hero locked in their cells and get a small bit of banter before they're released. Doesn't give us much except a little gag about proceeding to the nearest evacuation facility. This leads into the perfect couple being separated from the rest of Team Hero.
And the start of me noticing something kind of bad about the visuals. The characters start to move kind of out of place. They get very low reaction to a phantom in an elevator with them, for example.
We also get the explanation for why they can be seen now. Doesn't explain early convenience, but it explains why they will be during this action scene, given a quick assumption that it is from coming through the barrier.
Man, that must have been a long elevator ride. The team got down to the ground floor first, got a working car with a mounted gun, and was able to drive it to them all in such a short time span.
We see a nice example of everyone doomed to death thanks to the bad guys.
I'm sure they all survived somehow. Not like Final Fantasy is known for having dramatic scenes where a bunch of nameless people die. I'm not saying it's another trope, but it is pretty common to the series.
We get a little driving segment where, simply put, things go wrong.
Okay, now what?
We're going through the station.
What?
Captain,
What
with
are
all
we
due
doing?
respect.
Excuse me,
The
Captain.
station. We're going through it.
It's the only way.
So I gather this will be somewhat of a rough ride.
Doc, you've got a talent for understatement.
Did I mention I like the banter in this movie?
Yeah, I do too. They decide to drive off the road through a building because they don't have any other choice. Bad ideas tend to end badly, so...
Anybody hurt?
Captain!
Oh, God. Talk to me, Sarge.
Ouch!
Man, not often part of Team Hero dies in a Final Fantasy game, and usually when they do, they make it a much more drawn-out and heartfelt moment. Though in this case, I guess he did make it further than most. He was arrested, not retiring.
He wants them to leave him there, so they do, and end up coming across a ship. First response to it? Find a way to retrieve their fallen ally.
You know what just hit me? There's always either a black character or a non-human character in the group.
I'm sure that's not correct. Couldn't be. Getting away from the thought, we find Team Hero split up to try and find fuel cells so they can get the missing part of their crew back, while at the same time trying to get the ship ready for takeoff. It seemed to be going pretty well until it turned out the ship is tethered to the launch pad for some reason. So two of Team Hero decide to go out and fix the issue.
Jane, let me ask you something. You think we're gonna get out of here alive? I mean, I wonder if anybody else has gotten out. You think anyone's made it this far? Huh? You think this 8 spirit stuff is really gonna work against the Phantoms? I mean, what if it's all a bunch of mumbo-jumbo? Ow! Jane, do you mind if we stop talking? I'm trying to concentrate here.
Comedy gets cut short as the Phantoms start to emerge from the ground, so we get a pretty tame action scene where pretty much nothing happens until comic relief finishes his job. And then he and his guardian angel get axed off.
Wow, that makes 3 of Team Hero dead. If this keeps up, we'll have more Team Hero deaths in one movie than is in every Final Fantasy game to date.
This leaves us with Sid and the perfect couple to finish the job for Team Hero.
I really want comic relief back. He was my favorite character. I leveled him so much higher than everyone else.
Yeah. They moved the ship into place while shooting at the thing with possibly the tiniest gun they could have picked for the job. And it turns out Sarge isn't dead after all.
Give him a minute.
Well, now there really has been 3 hero deaths in this movie so far. Gray gives his last words planning fully to stay behind like a good little guardian would. But they come back for him just in the nick of time.
Why they couldn't just back up and get him right then, I'm not sure. Maybe Sid has more upper body strength than her.
They all safely escape to space. You know, except for 3 of the good characters.
Another Final Fantasy trope?
Space is not a Final Fantasy trope.
We're getting to the moment of sadness. There's usually a point before the games begin to ramp up towards the climax in which things will get quiet and grim and feel like all hope is lost. In this case, they're isolated in space while the city burns. Their 3 comrades are dead and the only help they have is an old man who thinks the planet is alive.
Camera pans around and now I guess everyone has the same plan to escape into outer space. And what's this? The bad guy's actually gonna kill himself?
I like this bad guy. He has a moral code.
Oh, come on!
Bad guy doubles down on his idiocy.
Damn it, I almost had one. While the bad guy heads to the Zeus cannon, Team Hero decides to head right into the heart of all the Phantoms because the final spirit they need is right there.
We do that. Exactly.
I can construct a device that would attach to Aki's chest plate to gather the 8 spirits, and then...
And then what?
And then we wait and see what happens.
Genius! I've never heard any better plan than this.
Except maybe the bad guy's plan of using a giant freaking laser.
Gray makes a perfectly reasonable idea of not committing suicide, but is overruled by an old man and a woman whose goal in life is to save humanity, even if it means death. They narrow down where the final phantom is and start their way to it, right as the bad guy fires the Zeus cannon.
The 8th spirit is not on our scanner. Do you have it?
The 8th spirit has been destroyed.
What are we going to do now?
Nothing. This mission is over.
The bad guy fires the cannon again, and what do you know? The tried and true method fails to kill it, and instead pisses it off more. 2 of Team Hero are thrown down to the ground. The Jello from the start of the movie makes a guest appearance, and our heroes end up stranded right in the lion's den, so to speak. They try to speak with the bad guy, but he's so far gone that he ignores and continues his plan anyway.
The bad guy has gone completely mental at this point, not even caring if it destroys him so long as he just continues to do stupid thing after stupid thing. Seems accurate.
Repeated firings of the Zeus cannon lead to the Earth breaking apart and dropping the perfect couple down into the planet, and somehow breaking their shields so they have to get out of the, car? Yeah, let's go with car.
This is not a good place to be.
Why, thank you, Captain Obvious. Now stop stealing comic relief's lines.
What the hell is that? That's not what I think it is it?
Yes, it's Gaia.
This is definitely not a good place to be.
Oh, who knew Gaia was like only half a mile under the Earth's surface?
You'd have thought during all our technological advancements, we'd have found that at some point, who am I kidding? We're too busy trying to figure out if we have any scarier shit than anglerfish in the ocean.
Bad guy decides being stupid isn't killing him fast enough, so he decides to go manual override so he can blow himself up twice as fast. Back on Earth, we get some banter explaining that the 8th spirit is created by phantoms touching the Earth's Gaia, and thus they are in the perfect location for said 8th spirit.
How can they see the phantoms now? They had the eye things for earlier. They had the excuse of it being residue from the shields after that. But here, what? Did they actually incorporate the random fights mechanic into the movie too? These are so strong they actually appear in the level, and the others were so weak they didn't?
You're overthinking it. Let's just say the Zeus cannon did it. They end up quickly finding another spirit and have to narrow it down. Is she sleeping? They're surrounded by monsters!
Better question, how did the car get out there? Didn't we just see them have to walk away from it, and now it's in the scene for her to sleep in?
We yet get another dream sequence. In this case,
I don't know.
Do you hear me, Sid? The wave pattern is complete.
Yes, I read you. This is wonderful. I don't see how you could have found the final spirit.
It found me, Doctor.
Oh, sure, that makes enough sense.
Deus Ex Machina out of nowhere.
Stop with the tropes. She plugs the completed frequency in and tells Gray the two of them need to wait and hope it works. It of course works, but then the bad guy gets his Zeus cannon overridden, so he can give another shot down, ruin everything, and then blow his ass up.
Serves him right. He had his chance to break the mold.
Just as everything looked like it was going to work out, the Phantom Gaia overtakes the Earth Gaia and starts to ruin everything. The car ends up destroyed and things look bad, but it turns out they still have the wave necessary. They just need a connecting wire.
And like a good old guardian, Gray gives his life protecting the selfless protagonist and saves the day.
We see the life force of the planet emit and the protagonist enjoying the sunrise as an eagle flies off to reveal the credits.
It was actually fun to watch, and unlike a lot of movies, this one had a group with personality to them. If they hadn't picked Earth for it, I get the feeling a lot of the hate for it wouldn't exist. I think the mention of Earth early on just kind of killed the way most perceived it. A lot of the Final Fantasy tropes are present, and for an hour and a half runtime, they did a pretty good job of throwing as much coherency as they could into it. Because of that, it ended up having to jam-pack a lot in there, because they tried to have a full Final Fantasy game inside less than 2 hours. And because of it, sometimes something vital to explaining what is going on turned out to be explained in a sentence near the beginning of the entire movie. In my opinion, this movie is a guilty pleasure. There are real problems with it, like pacing issues and inconsistencies between scenes, but it's still a Final Fantasy movie, not just in name. It hits a lot of the notes, and I believe that had it not been on Earth, people would be more accepting of it.
For me, I would have to say guilty pleasure as well. It's definitely one of those movies I could kick back and watch with a bowl of popcorn and enjoy. It does actually follow the tropes for Final Fantasy games pretty well, but in my opinion they could have done more with it. Instead of using guns that run on magic, they could have shown more magic as a whole. I'd still be up for rewatching the movie later on down the road.
Maybe there's more connection in this movie than people think.
Gaia, Gaia,
Gaia.
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 Gaia. Gaia.